Still, I am. So, the honorary members sitting on the dais, honorary members of the People's Parliament coming from the entire country, nook and a corner of the country, covering at least 25 major states. Friends, I am placing before you the Bangalore Declaration, that is the declaration of the People's Parliament, which will guide us for the second phase of movement in which we are entering from today onwards. Today, 24th January 2026, under the auspices of the All India Slave Education Committee, we have reached the final phase of historic People's Movement, People's Parliament in the city of Bangalore. We are compelled to undertake this initiative in order to confront this disastrous situation recently brought about the country's education sector. In the name of educational reform, the central government, without allowing any discussion with the general public or in the parliament, and in complete disregard in democratic norms, unilaterally adopted the National Education Policy 2020 during the COVID period solely on the basis of a cabinet decision and has begun implementing it with undue haste. The education policy has launched an all-round attack on education from the pre-primary level to the highest level of learning. We are witnessing its devastating consequences today. Unchecked commercialization and privatization of education have become rampant. The number of vacant teaching posts in government institutions are increasing. While the student enrollment is declining due to extremely poor, the closure and merger of government schools have become a common phenomenon across the all states of country. Communalization of education has become a core objective of NEP 2020 by destroying scientific empire, distorting history. The NEP has created an environment that threatens the very existence of the education itself. To counter this, the All India Same Education Committee drafted the People's Education Policy PEP 2025 that was published on 22nd May 2025, the birthday of Raja Rammohn Rai, pioneer of Indian Renaissance, and was placed before the people for discussion. From the very day of the release of this draft, PEP 2025, a large number of opinions, suggestions, and amendments were received from students, teachers, researchers, educationists, and concerned citizens across the country. Today, 24th January 2026, the country has witnessed an unprecedented event in the education movement in the history of independent India. After careful completion, discussion, compilation, discussion, and review of the views and proposals received, the People's Parliament, with the active participation more than thousands representatives from different parts of the country and several distinguished personalities, has adopted the People's Education Policy 2026 on this historic day. The People's Parliament proudly declares that this policy has genuinely emerged as a people's education policy reflecting the aspiration of the people and demanding the repeal of the thoroughly destructive National Education Policy 2020. The People's Education Policy 2026 adopts the following core principles grounded in secular, democratic, scientific, and universal education. The primary responsibility for providing education, as well as the financial responsibility for education, must be borne by the government. Accordingly, both central and state governments must allocate adequate funds for education in their budgets. Commercialization, communalization, and all forms of discrimination in education is to be completely stopped. A two language policy, mother tongue and English, shall be implemented across the entire country, irrespective of social status or economic background. The right to universal education and equity in education must be guaranteed. The adoption of this policy marks the beginning of a new phase of the education movement. Therefore, this People's Parliament hereby resolves that 1. All representatives present shall, upon returning to their respective states, widely share and popularize the achievements of the People's Parliament. That is, the adoption of the People's Education Policy 2026, especially among students, teachers, researchers, educationists, and the general public in school, colleges, universities, research institutions, and local communities. 2. The People's Parliament collectively and univocally demands the immediate withdrawal of National Education Policy 2020, which undermines the fundamental values of education, promotes communalism, distorts history and science, destroys educational autonomy, and imposes authoritarian decisions through extreme centralization. 3. Simultaneously, the People's Parliament strongly and resolutely demands the implementation of the People's Education Policy 2026 at all levels. 4. The next phase of the movement shall involve intensified campaign at the village, block, and district levels, along with the formation of committees in new areas to broaden and strengthen the movement. 5. Representatives of the People's Parliament shall consistently raise the demand for the implementation of the People's Education Policy before the educational administrative offices at the block, subdivision, district, and state headquarters. 6. On behalf of the National Committee of the All India Civil Education Committee, a signature campaign will be organized throughout the country on the basis of the above demands, and signed memoranda shall be submitted to the central government as well as the state governments. 7. The education movement shall be elevated to such a level of unity, strength, and mass participation that the government is compelled to introduce and enforce the People's Education Policy 2026 in its entirety. This People's Parliament calls upon all participants in the historic assembly to make all necessary preparations and work tirelessly to realize these objectives. Thank you all.